Welcome to this meeting of the local review body of the 10th of September. Can I first ask members to appoint a chairman for the meeting, please?
I propose Archie Driver.
Thank you, members. Can I welcome everybody to this local review body meeting on the 10th of September, in which we're going to preside over one application. Is there any apologies? Sederunt?
Present and correct, thank you.
Thank you. Then can I ask you to take us through the review body?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. We have one notice of review today, being item 4, Bishopscroft, Main Street, Isle of Whithorn. Refusal of planning permission for installation of replacement windows to front and rear elevation, 4 to each elevation and door to side elevation, retrospective 14P10081. Before I go through the papers, I'm going to first ask my colleague, the planning advisor, to advise of an amendment to the papers.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, the notice of review form contained on page 7 to 11 of the agenda papers is not the correct one. The correct version has now been circulated to all panel members. What appears to have happened is that unusually 2 separate notices of review for the same applicant and for the same agent and for the same property were submitted in close succession. As they appeared at face value to be a duplicate submission for the same proposals, the second form was just filed away with the original folder, hence why the incorrect form has appeared in the agenda papers. However, it's now clear that there were actually 2 separate notices of review for different planning applications. One is for the retrospective installation of windows and a side door, which is 14P10081, which is the application before the local review body today. The other is for just a replacement front door, which is 14P10074. Whilst it would be clearly desirable for the local review body to consider both notices of review today, given that they refer to exactly the same property, as the notice of review for the front door has not been properly registered or been subject to the statutory consultation of interested parties and the applicant allowed to respond, due process has not yet been followed and any decision made today could be correctly open to challenge. So we'll be contacting the agent to apologise for this error and try and bring the notice of review for the front door alone to the October local review body meeting. Happy to answer any questions, but just as long as members are clear that the papers you have before you are all correct except for the one thing, which is pages 7 to 11, but you've now got the correct form.
Before we go on, I'd just like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will be subsequently be available for public listening as well. So has anybody got any questions for David, or are you happy with the explanation? Okay, can we go through the rest of the...
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Right, we've got the notice of review as distributed today. We've got the report of handling, observations of appointed officer, comments of applicant's agent, planning application form, decision letter, and the relevant extracts of the local planning policies and plans, as well as the photos of the application site and locality. Grounds of refusal on page 52 are that the replacement windows proposed would fail to replicate the existing windows within the building in terms of their dimensions, detailing and materials, and it is considered that the replacement windows proposed would erode the character and appearance of this building and the wider conservation area, contrary to the terms of Structure Plan Policy E8, Wigtown Local Plan General Policies 19 and 50, and the guidance set out in the Supplementary Planning Guidance Number 2 and Scottish Historic Environment Policy. In addition, the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the original window which were removed were beyond reasonable repair. Requested method of determination are that the applicant would want to have this dealt with by an inspection of the land subject of the appeal. Grounds stated in the notice of review are that the previous windows on this non-listed building were in a terrible state of repair, and the proposed material of a UPVC would be much more hard-wearing. Although UPVC is not a traditional material and would represent a change to the fabric of the building, there are a large number of similar dwelling houses in the Isle of Whithorn conservation area which have had such windows installed for a long time. As such, the applicant does not consider that the proposal would harm the fabric of this building or the character of the conservation area, and that it would be unreasonable to refuse planning permission in these circumstances. If the comments of the interested parties, the development plan policies, so that the main issues that the local review body may wish to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies and structure plan policy E8 and local plan general policy 50 in particular? If not, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? What weight, if any, does the LRB wish to give to the amount of replacement windows which were legitimately installed in the Isle of Whithorn conservation area as permitted development prior to the change in national legislation which came into force in February 2012, and if the LRB is minded to accept the principle of modern replacement windows in this instance, does it consider the specific windows proposed are of an appropriate design? And what weight, if any, does the LRB wish to give to the fact that the application is now for retrospective planning permission, as unauthorised works were undertaken following the previous refusal of identical proposals? So, having outlined the documents within the members' papers, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. The local review body has the following options. It can decide if it has sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations, resolve to hold a hearing, resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, and if the local review body resolves to hold a site visit, there would not be a decision made today. So if the local review body resolves it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination, and the decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. An independent planning advisor is present to assist at today's meeting. It is confirmed he did not have any involvement in this case or the previous refused application, and was not the case officer or the appointed officer for these applications. He is here purely to provide independent advice as needed on matters of policy, law or process to the LRB. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I will ask the Chairman now to lead the debate, and in the first instance to lead the local review body through the agenda papers together and decide if it has sufficient information before it to make a determination today.
Okay, thank you very much. David, have you got any photographs before we actually go into the paperwork?
Yes, thank you, Chair. These are exactly the same photos that you have starting at page 73 of your agenda. The first is one which was taken in June 2013, which shows the front elevation as was. The door, which is the subject of the separate application, is the front door, which the pointer is over just now. These were the timber sash and case windows which were in place at the time that the original application was considered. And these are the ones to the rear. Point to draw to your attention is that there was a central stone mullion at the rear, which divided the windows into two there at that time. It appears from the photo these would have been, the ones on the left-hand side would have been non-original windows, but these certainly look very much like windows. I'll let you draw your own conclusion as to looking at that first photo again, and this one as to whether the windows were in a poor state or not. They certainly appear to me to be quite well maintained and painted, but obviously we've no close-up examination of those. That was the side door. It was a solid painted timber door, which was in situ before. And this is a couple of photos just to show the street scene. So clearly the property immediately next door has had replacement windows added in, UPVC. It was quite legitimate for them to do that until legislation changed in February 2012. However, the next building is original timber sash and case, as is more clearly shown there with the original timber door. And you get a general view along the street scene, some which are modern windows, some which aren't. And then this is the same photo that you will see on page 77 of your agenda. And this was taken in earlier this year, 2014, where the door hasn't been replaced. That's the separate application. What has happened is that the first floor and ground floor front elevation windows have all been replaced with a flatter profile UPVC replacement window. That shows it in the context in the street scene. Again, the one further to the left still has its original windows. And then round to the rear, completely new windows installed there, and the central mullion has disappeared, so you've got a more horizontal emphasis. The side door has been replaced from the vertical timber painted door that you saw before to a UPVC one with a glazed panel above. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Members, we'll just go through the paperwork in the report. We have the notice of review, which is pages 5 to 14. Are there any questions on that particular? David?
Chair, I think this is a rather unfortunate review, given that there was a first application put in 2013, and it was refused then, and they just went ahead and put the windows in, irrespective of the decisions made. I would have thought the proper time to make an appeal was at that time, rather than go ahead and do what they've done now. I get the impression that although they blame the supplier of the windows for going ahead and doing it, somebody must have advised them or asked them to do it, irrespective of the planning permission. And I think that's very unfortunate that people are willing to go ahead like that, irrespective of the planning permission or otherwise that was given, decisions that were made. And I think it's very unfortunate this sort of thing's happening in the area. And I would hope we can do something about working with agents to get these things done properly in the proper process.
Yeah. Is that a question or a statement?
I suppose as much as anything, it's a statement. And if they'd come back and then got permission on appeal previously, there could have been discussions about the most suitable plastic windows if they were given to do that. And I think we're between a rock and a hard place, to be honest with you.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, David. We then have the report on the handling at pages 15 to 22. Any questions on that? I think, David, that comes back to what you were saying was a report on the handling of this particular thing. Observations of the appointed officer, pages 23 to 26. Any questions? Comments of the applicant's agent, observations of the appointed, page 27 to 30. Any questions on that? No, thank you. Sorry, David?
It's just again that we argue that a precedent for PVC windows has been set. The precedent has been set, but as the planners rightly state, the regulations have been changed, and we've got to go by the regulations. I'm not happy with the way this has been done by the agent at all, and I think we've been, as I say, put between a rock and a hard place.
I think you're right on that, David, because there has been other cases we brought in front of the LRB which have overturned the officer's recommendation because of exceptions to policy. we'll come to that at the end, I think, when we come to our deliberation. If we come to a deliberation, of course, we may decide to have a site visit. Can I go on to planning application form 25th of February 2014, which is pages 31 to 48. Any questions on that? Straightforward, if it was the right one.
Yes, I can definitely confirm all the documents in their agenda papers are correct, except for the original notice of review form.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then we have the relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway structure policy, the Wigtown local plan, etc., pages 55 to 70. Any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. That's policy as is. No, good. Photos of the application site, which we've already seen. Sorry.
As I say, it's in a conservation area, but on the very last one, is there any planning permission required for the likes of satellite dishes in a conservation area?
Well, it's obviously a separate matter to what's before us today, but yes, there is a requirement in a conservation area for installation of satellite dishes. That only kicks in as before from the February 2012 change. So anything which was there before may or may not have required.
Yeah.
David, would the applicant have had to apply for planning permission if they wanted to change the colour of the windows, of the wooden ones?
Very technically, yes. I mean, if you are doing something which materially affects the external appearance of a building, that as regards development and application of any colour to any property within a conservation area or to a listed building does require planning permission. You would normally apply that to where you would be painting the whole facade of the building. So, for example, if looking at the front elevation there, if they wanted to suddenly make that a day glow orange colour, that clearly would require permission. It's unlikely to be acceptable. It's matter of fact and degree, but arguably, yes, even painting the colour of windows, timber sash and case windows, to repaint them a different colour very technically probably does require planning permission.
Is that much the same as in that photo if they put in mahogany windows, sash and case windows?
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing anything which changes the external appearance of the building so that any reasonable person would have a look at it and say, well, that's different in a conservation area, that requires permission. Whether or not it's acceptable is a separate matter, but the normal view is that if you're materially affecting the external appearance, that needs.
Okay, thanks very much. So we've got to make a decision whether we have enough information to make a decision today. I think that we do have enough information to make a decision today. We don't need a site visit. I think there's enough information in the report and the photographs that we can actually make this decision today. Members, over to you to see if you've got anything to add. Peter?
Just one other question. If we decided to leave the UPVC windows there, would we be allowed to impose a fine for not following regulations?
That would be down to planning enforcement officers. We make a decision on the planning application of the local review body. We are not, shall we say, judge and jury of that particular. We are of the application, but not on that side of things. I think from my perspective on this report, looking at that particular picture, there is a sort of symmetry between next door and the following door, the application site. It would be an exception, but there has been cases, as I said before, in the past that exceptions have been made, and I'm thinking about a place in Lochmaben where recently it's actually changed. And I would suggest that it's an exception to policy, but we allow this in the first instance. It's unfortunate that the door one wasn't here. We could have done both of them at the same time. But that's what my suggestion would be, and I'm happy to take members' others' recommendations.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Chair, but my problem is with a change in legislation. When do we start introducing it? We could finish up doing the whole streetscape the same way, but because the legislation has only come in the last couple of years, and people are still wanting plastic windows. And I don't suppose we are in a position to discuss more appropriate style of window. I don't suppose we're in that position either. But as I say, if we agree this today, where does it leave us if another application comes in tomorrow?
Patsy?
I would go along with Jock on this, because actually there's no point in having a conservation area and having regulations in. They talk about it being unfair and everything else, but the rules have changed, and it's a bit like, buyer beware. If you're doing alterations to your house, find out what you can and cannot do. I don't suppose for a minute that they didn't know it was a conservation area, because they've lived there, sounds like, for quite a long time. And this thing that gets me is that they got refusal and they went on and did it anyway. And I just don't think we can condone that. I think that's a really backward step for us as a planning authority. I have real problems with that, I think we've tried in the past to get people to come forward, as I think as Jock said, when they got the refusals, we've gone for an appeal then and let us see it before they did anything. And who knows what would have happened. But I hate it when they go on and then think it's an easy run. Once you've done it, you can get permission. I don't think that's the right signal to send out.
David, just coming back on that particular point, I mean, is there anything that the planning enforcement officers can do to, I think it's not make an example, but obviously people, when they're flouting planning legislation, and in this case, they've obviously had the application in 2013, which was refused. Now it's a retrospective planning application, which, it's because of what's happened in the past. And this is the area that I find, difficult, is that we have in the past overturned an officer's decision because of it's been done in places like Lochmaben. Is there anything that can be done through planning enforcement to, highlight the need for people to stick with the planning applications in the future?
There's quite a lot of points in that. The Lochmaben case, just to be clear, that was one which was exactly the same agent applying for very similar windows in Lochmaben last year, which the LRB considered, and they took the view with that particular case, which wasn't retrospective, to uphold the officer's original decision and not allow UPVC windows in that building. They were minded to accept an acceptable version of UPVC windows, which I think officers would go with as well, which is, say, a sliding sash and case UPVC. That would at least retain the appearance that you can see on the left-hand side there, where it would have that step, and it would be finer articulation of the windows, and you can get some very good ones. I could even point ones out in Dumfries town centre. So those ones were what the LRB in the Lochmaben case were looking for, and they did uphold the decision. They didn't allow the same agent to do this. Here they've actually gone on, the excuse which is given on page 33 is that an error was made by the product manufacturer, who did not realise that planning application reference 13P10228 was a refusal, and it was subsequently overlooked. Well, that's okay, we're not perfect because we've got the wrong form in here today, but nonetheless, that's quite a severe overlooking, that it almost questions why did they bother even applying if they were just going to go and do it. Anyway, they are where we are. It's gone in. You cannot use enforcement powers punitively. You can't use it to punish people. So to answer Councillor Diggle's query, you can't serve a notice of fine for somebody having done this. What you have to do is go through the process, which is, in the first instance, to test whether or not a retrospective planning application would be acceptable, so you to invite them to apply, which is what they've done here. Officers clearly took the view that it wasn't acceptable. It wasn't acceptable when they'd applied without doing it, so why should it be acceptable after they'd done it? Which is why it's before yourselves. There's a number of aspects, I suppose. Would UPVC be acceptable there in a different arrangement? Quite possibly, but we can't test that because this isn't what's before you. What you have is what's there. There are a number of options, and for example, enforcement is a discretionary matter. It's also a delegated matter to officers. It wouldn't necessarily follow that just because a decision was upheld by the local review body, that we would seek direct action, rip all these windows out and replace them straight away. But it does raise the query as to whether or not somebody should be rewarded for having effectively ignored a previous refusal. So that there's two steps, if you like. The LRB would have it in its power to either to just say, well, okay, in the circumstances, we think the context of the conservation area here has been subject to legitimate replacements in the past. You've got the one next door that's just like that. What's the harm? You could quite legitimately take that view. You could equally take the view that the officers were correct in looking at this as a proposal, but then not want to see enforcement action carried out. So that you would actually have a refusal of them, so they would remain unauthorized, but you could give an instruction that you think it would be inappropriate to carry out enforcement action in such a case. Or you can go for the whole hog and say refuse and give an instruction to officers to undertake enforcement action, or just leave it to officers alone to come to their own conclusion.
David, you see, you were talking about that stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's just got harder.
But that's right.
Just a minute, John
Sorry.
wanted in first.
It was just that, as I say, we're supposing that the window supplier, it seems to me that Anglian Windows is a nationwide supplier, and they've just, as I say, I don't know how their salesmen go about it, like, but they may have said, oh, we'll get away with it elsewhere, so just go ahead and you might get away with it. Whereas a local supplier of the windows might have said, you've refused, I'm not going to do that because it's in a conservation area. I just don't. Well, it's this supposition that I've got a lot of sympathy for, as I say, we've got to go with the regulations as they are now, but I have got a lot of sympathy, much like what Archie is saying there, like on the supplier. I just don't know what information they were given by the window suppliers. I think it's down to that, like, that whether they've just said, I just carry ahead with it, they'll not tell it to take them out now. I don't know, because it's a nationwide, they might get away with that elsewhere, but I don't know.
David?
Well, I wouldn't have thought that the supplier was involved in that. Unfortunately, I think the agent, when he's lost before, he's decided, and as you say, it's the same one that was in Lochmaben, and he lost the application. He's lost the original application, and just decided, right, we'll fit the windows in and go for a retrospective. And I think that's very unfortunate. Somebody's abusing it, well, perceived as abusing the system like that. And it is how we might, if it hadn't been as distorted as, or in my view, as distorted as that, we may have granted the application, overruled the officer's decision. But when somebody appears to have been abusing the system like that, it gives certainly me great cause for concern, and it's how we address that issue. Albeit we may go down the road of agreeing this today, but there's an issue there that I think we need to have addressed somehow. How we do it, I don't know.
I wonder if to take this forward, then the Planning Applications Committee, there's advice given or a seminar to advise on the new conservation type issues that the new planning comes up with, planning regulations come up with. Patchy.
Yes, the store that has done UPVC, they're not the same as the one that was here. They're sliding, aren't they? No, they're flat too, are they?
I think the one in the centre there is, as far as I can tell, what it looks like is an opening upper hopper. Might be another window photo. Yeah, they appear to be relatively flat, so that they're certainly not sliding sash in case UPVC ones.
The other thing is that, the policy 15 conservation area says that, the development has to preserve or enhance and use of materials and detailing of general massing is really important in the design. And this is, they just said, it doesn't matter, and going to get permission to put them. Really resent put in a position like this. Really, really do. And I think if they come at the appropriate time, so this is why we need to do it. And I know it's not really a planning reason that they live near the sea and everything, but you can kind of understand it. But I think to do it this way, I see that we can accept it as an appropriate way to come back by planners for very proper reasons. You know, the rules have changed. And the fact that they think there's a precedent set, I don't think there is, because the rules have got to look forward and not back. And there's no point in having a conservation area. We might as well just not have a conservation area there. This is going to happen. Well, all you've got to do is do it retrospectively. That does set a precedent, I think.
Pierre?
How long has it been a conservation area? Have other UPVC windows been put in whilst it has been a conservation area?
Most of the conservation areas in Dumfries and Galloway were established in about 1970s. And the legislative change, which removed all permitted development rights, as I say, only actually came in February 2012. What, with the benefit of hindsight, should have happened, I mean, I was still at primary school when this should have happened, to be honest, is in the 1970s, they should have put in place what's called an Article 4 direction on all conservation areas. In other authorities I've worked in, they did exist. You didn't have a conservation area without an Article 4, so that in all instances you always required permission for everything. That's what's preserved it. But there are only a handful of conservation areas throughout Dumfries and Galloway that had Article 4 directions on them. Some, after I started here, kicked in. Say Moffat was one of the first ones. And slowly it's progressed since then, from the 1990s. But by that stage, much damage had already been done, where replacement windows had been installed. But benefit of hindsight's a wonderful thing, but the legislative change nationally did mark a shift. The Scottish Government were giving a clear steer that they felt conservation areas were important and therefore should be protected, and you therefore couldn't do anything to a building in that area without needing planning permission.
Pierre?
Yeah, where I am, I mean, I don't have a problem with the new look of this building. And if you just go to the other slide, where that one back, that one. I mean, you look at the house to the left there with all that UPVC. I presume it's UPVC. Looks like it. I think that looks ghastly. But it is a blatant flouting of the planning procedures.
Okay, so I've put a suggestion forward. Patsy, you want to put an alternative?
I have to say that we have to go with the planning officer recommendation for the reasons given.
Sorry, could I just make a pedantic point, but an important one? Because the decision's already been made, it's not a recommendation. It would be upholding the original decision.
Sorry, I would uphold the planning officer for the reasons given.
John?
Well, as I say, Jock say, we've got between a rock and a hard place, and we've got to make it something like. But as I say, seeing it, the three terraces together, like, I don't think it looks that ghastly. So I would, as I say, rock and a hard place, but I'll go with that.
So are you seconding mine? Patsy, have you got a seconder?
I'll second it.
Yeah. So we have a motion and amendment. Right.
Is there anything that can be done with this agent for abusing the planning system? As I say, that's the perception that I've got. He lost out in Lochmaben, he lost out in Glenluce, and what he's done is he's gone ahead. I don't believe that the supplier of the windows would do anything until he got instruction from the agent or the applicant. And it's what can we do to stop that happening again? Because this guy will come back and do the same again.
John?
Well, that's the problem I've got. I had no knowledge of this in the past. As I say, I know I've had no knowledge of that in the past. I just heard it and hear the now.
Well, as I say, you can't, it's not a court of law where he's been found guilty. They've clearly on page 33 given what they consider to be the justification as part of the application form for why it was an error on their part. They've held their hands up and said that it was subsequently overlooked. Obviously, a responsible agent probably shouldn't have done that, but certainly I will be speaking to him later today anyway to apologise for us making an error and overlooking his second notice of review and just thinking it was one and the same. So I can raise that with them then, that there are concerns about the fact that this application was retrospective. But as I say, you can't use the planning system punitively. You can't punish them for doing that. All you can actually do is look at the development, not the developer or the agent.
Patsy?
It's also, we've concentrated very much on the windows at the front, but the windows at the back, they're completely different. What they've done is different. It's just blatant writing of what was there before, which is what you're meant to do. You're meant to keep it the same, not change it. And that goes for the side door as well. And it's just so different to what, it's a wooden door, and now you put in plastic glazed windows. It's so different. And that's not what should happen in a conservation area. I just think they've just gone on and done it and think, I just find it really, and I think the front, looking at it, yes, it doesn't look any different. That's not really the point. It's not really the point. The point is, should that have happened, and has it been done in the proper way? And I would have to say it hasn't. And if we've got going to do anything as a planning authority to make our systems work and our rules and regulations work, we've got to be consistent. Retrospective, if it's a genuine, real mistake and they made an error, you have a bit more sympathy. They got a refusal and came back, did it, and then thought they could get permission. And that cannot be condoned. I'm really sorry.
John? Pierre?
I'd just like to reiterate what Pat is saying, is that the fact that they had a refusal and then went for it, to my mind, says, well, you might as well not have any planning law. Let's just chuck the book out the window. So,
Okay, so we have a motion and amendment.
Right, I have a...
Sorry, can I just clarify, what were the grounds for the approval? Was it, I think I made a note of something along the grounds that there were other ones in the area, which was similar. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've got a motion proposed by Chairman Archie Dryborough, seconded by John Martin, that to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and grant planning permission as an exception to policy, given that there's others in the area. We have an amendment proposed by Patsy Gilroy, seconded by Peter Diggle, to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse planning permission for the reasons in the report.
Is everybody clear on that? Yeah.
Okay, right. Chairman, motion or amendment?
Motion.
Peter Diggle, Patsy Gilroy, John Martin, David McKay. Amendment is carried, 3 votes to 2. Decision being to uphold the decision of appointed officer and refuse the planning permission for the reasons in the report.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no other business. Patsy?
If there's another one coming forward for the same house, does the same committee sit on that, or do you just do a completely randomly new review board?
No, you're excused from that one. There will be a different panel for October, and we will bring people to that.